If you don't know, Aaron Bryce are kind of the heart of the band The National, along with Matt Berenger. And this was a film that was made where people could get together and play. So for this piece, and we'll talk about your relationship with the band in a second, how did you put together the music? Because it's so spot on, and yet they're probably 2,000 miles apart.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can't see you all. First of all, thank you so much for coming and being here. Like, you guys make the film complete, and without you, the film would be not seen, right? And it's so lovely to be in a room with people watching a movie, so thank you so much for being part of our experience. Aaron and Bryce, so they're twin brothers, right? And they both want to be with each other all the time, do the thing of finishing each other's sentences, and are highly competitive with each other, which is really beneficial to me, because they're kind of competing with chords and instrumentation. And so that last piece of music you heard is a back and forth from France to New York, where Bryce did the clarinet chords, and then Aaron's like, yeah, those are pretty good, but I want to add this part, and then Bryce competitively responds, right? And I'm benefiting from all their competition with each other. But they're lovely. I joke because they're like, it's really quite magical what they do together. And to me, the score of the film is very subtle. It's very gossamer, like gentle, but it's like the sound of the space between Joaquin's character and Woody's character to me.
So we hear them playing at the end of the film, and in many ways, your relationship with the band is the beginning of the film as well. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah,
Or
maybe.
part of it.
I mean, I was thinking of it. I did a long project with the National before this film, a long short film, a medium film, and then I ended up helping them with the record. So we had this lovely time together. And during that time, I was writing this, and that film I made for them was in black and white. So I was kind of practicing for this. And some of my favorite parts of this film I stole from them and their children. The whole orphan story is from Aaron Dessner's daughter, Ingrid. She does that straight out. And so if you're me, a writer-director works like I do, and you go to the house and that's happening, of course you're going to ask, like, dear Ingrid, can I please steal this? And she said yes. Yeah.
How did Woody become part of this project? What were you looking for? And maybe if Woody wasn't that person, because sometimes you want to be surprised or challenged, what did he offer that maybe surprised you? And Woody, do you remember your first meeting with Mike?
Yes.
You'll never get the mic back.
Yeah.
Okay, is this on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, we did a lot of self-tapes first. Not many self-tapes, and then we got thrown out to do an audition with Joaquin. Then that went really well, so I got called back the next day for another one. And then we waited forever to find out if we got it. Then we waited double that to find out if we could get the visa. That was the pain, the visa. That was like the worst thing. I'd say if you want a visa, please just try.
What year was this, Mike? Was this
This was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
pre-COVID and maybe a different administration?
Exactly.
Okay, just want to make sure
Yeah.
who was running visas.
Yeah, exactly.
But you made it.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm going to ask you, you have something on paper, and then you have an actor who is, by default, I think, going to change what it is you've written. And Woody, you can start with this. In terms of what you saw on the page, and what you thought this character would say, and maybe wouldn't say, did you have conversations about what felt real to you, and what maybe you wanted to work with Mike on?
That would happen a lot. It would very like a lot be he would write it, and I thought me as a human being that breathes air wouldn't be saying that. it would always to me feel like not always. I mean, his script writing is so natural, but sometimes me as a child that isn't an extreme intellectual wouldn't be saying all this deep stuff. So it would always be just sometimes I'd go up to him and I'd get, well, here's the thing, I would always think about saying it to him, and then I'd get my mum because I wouldn't want to be rude. And then she'd do it way better than I could ever because she actually knew how to say words to people.
That's very brave as an actor to go to your director and say, I'm not that eloquent, or I'm not that, those are not words in my vocabulary. But again, it's authentic, correct?
I mean, like the hardest thing about being an actor is sitting there and looking like you're human. That's the one thing that I find very difficult. When you're not doing anything and you just kind of have to be there with like a glass of water, just like you're never doing anything. It's those bits when you're not doing anything that hard. Like sitting there looking like you're not an idiot.
Mike, I want to ask you this question about what Woody brought to the part that maybe you didn't anticipate, the way that the script started to follow, in a way, what he was giving you that maybe you didn't imagine when you were first setting out to write it. And Woody, I hate to do this, but you have to give up to Mike.
It's interesting because I definitely give everyone a lot of freedom because I don't want us to just be executing some plan I wrote like 6 months before. Hopefully we're all learning. Hopefully exciting things are happening every day that kind of keep it alive and surprise is a wonderful and powerful thing, right? That can make the film better. So I'm definitely inviting, if something went as I pre-anticipated, I get really scared, right? I feel like that's gotta be a horrible scene. With Woody, definitely gave me tons of freedom. I have to say, it's very much like what I hoped it would be. Someone who's like really smart, totally challenging, and totally like, whatever, like a child is not gonna suffer a fool, right? And that's very much my experience of not just my kid, but other kids I know. And I don't know, it's really interesting for me, I have this experience a lot. You tell an actor, oh, just go for it. These are the starting words, but we're alive here, and we're not like writing a book, we're making a movie, right? So let's make it alive. And often when you say that, they do your lines really awesomely. Or whatever, they follow the spirit of it, or they follow the intention of it. So I find that over and over again.
This is a film that, in some ways, was shaped by your being on the road with your child, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the root of the story and what you wanted to fictionalize, before we start talking about how that story changed, Beginners is a movie that is not just loosely, but about a real person.
Mm-hmm.
This might be also about a real person, but there's a material difference in age and agency and knowledge about what a movie about that person's life can be. So how did you negotiate that, even if it's fictionalized, with your child to borrow something that might be private and make sure they know what the transaction is?
With my own kid, you mean?
Yeah.
So like this film did come from me being a dad and my kid and our relationship. That was like the seed. Well, a lot of that is just up to me, right? And it's really different. I made a film kind of like whatever. The seed was my dad who came out when he was 75. And the next film was sort of like the seed who was my mom who was just a fish out of historical water. And like a uber feminist born in 1925. And they were dead. And I'm their child. So I have like a different agreement with them. I just have to, like, if I see them later, I have to be able to go, hey, I did this, And that's literally how I thought of it. This is really different. This is much more of a responsibility, much more is at stake. And it took me like a year or so, and Andrea Langenker-White's here, who helped me really kind of figure out, like, how can I make this safe for my kid? So a lot of this is selecting things. And a lot of the things I selected are things that like I know that are okay. And there's lots that I didn't put in that wouldn't be okay. It would be just too revealing or too delving into someone's mystery or delving into someone's vulnerabilities in a way they have no consent over.
The conceit of the radio reporter is something that allows you as a storyteller to have a character asking questions that outside of that occupation nobody could ask.
Yeah.
Or certainly not in the volume and recurrent that Joaquin's character does. Was that something that you figured out early on, that if you're trying to understand what kids think about, and obviously this film is populated with a lot of non-professional actors, that, I won't call it a device because it's more than a device, the idea that you have a radio reporter or a journalist asking questions gives you a path in as a storyteller to ask the questions you yourself might want to ask.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That plus, I'm a total radio journalist wannabe. Like I want to be Ira Glass or Studs Terkel or Scott Career. Like I think that's a rad job. And
Well,
it's,
we can swap jobs next week.
okay, cool. I do really love that work. I love it's not simple, but like the compared to filmmaking, it's a little easier to get done, you know? And the minimalism of it does just sound like that's like really attractive to me. So that was all in play, but then, you know, once you start writing, certain ideas fall off because they don't have legs, and certain ideas like continue. So a radio journalist, much like you said, it's an amazing avatar for a writer, director, person, because it's someone who can go and ask anyone a question. That's their job, and they're kind of curious. And then also this whole thing of like listening became so key. Like listening is a weird passive theme of the whole movie, or goal of the movie, or goal of the movie.
But there's also a kid, I'm assuming again,
Supposedly, I'm not sure.
Well,
Yeah.
the line is, kids tend to think freely. Adults, when they think, they tend to think in a tight space.
Yeah. That's by Ambar from New York City, yeah.
But what a great line.
Yeah.
And I think it almost defines this film. When you're listening to what these kids are saying, does that affect the kind of story you want to tell, or how much you want to highlight their thoughts about, because you can pick and choose what the thematic ideas are that you're choosing from them, but that is a profound saying.
So all the younger people in the film that you see, they're all non-actors, and they're from the cities that we visited, and those interviews are very real interviews. So what the struggle that we had, me and Jen Vaccarello, my editor, was how to make our film more electric, exciting, real, and relevant with these children's ideas and voices, without having them just support the fictional narrative characters. That would have been so exploitive, and I'm sure some people might still find it exploitive, but like it would have been just too transactional, right? We wanted that part of the film to be its own thing as much as possible, but relate just enough so it's like not annoying or not feels like a stray end. And then, but a magical, strange thing keeps happening. So there's a young kid named Evan in New York City, and he talks about his father being in jail. He's wearing a baseball hat, and we're in his house, and that's all real. And he talks about taking care of his sister. He doesn't mind if his younger sister treats him as a father or a brother. He's honored to take on that responsibility, and some responsibility are just thrown at you. Me and Joaquin are looking at each other like, whoa, that is so weird. That's the movie, you know. And we did include that. We did include that for many months of the edit because we found it too colonial, something, you know.
Woody, I'm going to ask you about working with Joaquin. You have a relationship as actors, but you also have a relationship as characters. And I don't even know if you were able to shoot even roughly chronologically, but as you're moving through the story, how would you say the relationship that you have with Joaquin as an actor starts to influence the relationship that you have as characters?
I think something that made the film very real is it was shot mostly in order. So we went LA, New York, New Orleans, and it is also the scenes are mostly in order, so I might be jumbled up. But our relationship grew as Jesse and Johnny did. We got more confident with each other as Jesse and Johnny did. There was never any, I think the main difference between us and Jesse and Johnny's relationship was never any awkwardness. Never any awkwardness because we were never really actors when we were in each other. We were playing. It was entirely, we were just bouncing off each other, and if Joaquin was being really like in a scene, I was being like in a scene. I would always try and one up him, and then he would double down. And I think working with him was a privilege as a human and as an actor. You learn so much from him, learn so much from him. If he wasn't an actor, I'm sure he could be some sort of teacher, even though he wouldn't want to be a teacher. If you've met him, you know he would not want to be a teacher.
Spiritual guru, man, how about that?
I think he could genuinely be someone who could do professional teachings to people. He's so smart, he's so clever, he's just everything you really want to work with as an actor. What he is, he's generous, he's helpful, and I mean, the big thing is he's funny.
Mhm.
So many actors are funny on screen, but just boring. But Joaquin is one of those people that's everything you want. I haven't worked with anyone who's boring.
Okay, I'll let Ryan Reynolds know. I'm looking forward to working. Mike, I want to ask you about this idea of creating a space where Joaquin and Woody can do what you're doing. I mean, it doesn't feel like if you're slating every scene and saying, let's go, do you keep rolling? What do you do situationally so that you can capture those moments that Woody was just talking about?
That's a cool question. So yeah, I feel like to me directing is like creating opportunities for actors to kind of like take flight, right? That's my responsibility. So shooting in order is really huge because you do like a crew, a relationship, and you do discover things, and then you can exploit those things you discover. It's like all the tapping and mirroring. That kind of Woody does a lot of like air drumming and stuff, and someone mirrored him back, and I was like, ooh, that's the movie, you know. So and I just invited people to do that with Woody in different situations. So things like that are happening all the time. And I definitely, maybe because it's a personal story, I'm terribly afraid of it being just like a memoir, right? It needs to take flight on the screen, hopefully, and take flight, hopefully, in this room. So that means it has to be like super real for them, or get under their skin, or have them get engaged. So I'm trying to do everything I can to like have them get infected with it, be a co-author with me, right? Have sovereignty over the characters. So yeah, shoot a lot in sequence. So I rarely do, I like to do like 4 takes in a row without cutting. Always tail slating. Often you don't know we're rolling when we start.
Oh yeah, 4 takes you do. He would do like 30. That scene in New York, one of the scenes in the bathtub, I started to think, okay, Mike, I'm gonna kill you. I know everyone who was with me there knew how angry I was, because I think it was like 35 takes we did of that.
Yeah.
You know what that's called, Woody? That's called a Fincher.
I know Kubrick did that, but he's Stanley Kubrick.
Okay.
And the scene that we did it with, I don't even know if that scene was I think it was just me talking in a bathtub. It wasn't even the most important scene, but I'm gonna.
Along those lines,
It was worth it. It was worth
I
it.
think parents especially watch this movie, and you have to create a tension about Jesse being exhausting. And parents know that they can love their kids with all their hearts, and they're still exhausted. And if you make the kid too exhausting, the audience might start to say, I can't deal with this kid anymore, like the adults around him. So how do you walk up to that line and make sure you haven't crossed it? Because obviously you want the audience to feel some of that frustration, but you don't want to lose them.
That was a really deep question, really, because what you're bumping in there is like cultural difference,
Right.
Family differences, and so I think I created a movie that mirrors a lot of my situation and my relationship with my kid and my friends' relationships with their kids, and I wouldn't call it exhausting, but like for sure like challenging, or like judo flipping you left and right, and supposedly you're the more powerful one, but you're really not. And I bet any parents out there maybe some of them would agree. But it's really interesting. So Brianne, who's a young woman in New Orleans, who when we enter New Orleans, she's talking about the Airbnbs and how people don't, like, New Orleans is made by the people who live there, not by.
Right.
So she's just a non-actor person. She saw the film. She's a friend, and she's like, I would never get away with what that kid gets away with. Right. So in her family, in her setting, in her cultural situation, that wouldn't be allowed. Right. And so that's I feel like if I was to make this movie again, I would explore that more explicitly. Because that's something I really saw in the edit of the film.
I'm going to end with this question, and I mentioned it to Mike when the film premiered at the Telluride Film Festival. I didn't say who the person was at the time because I didn't know if she wanted to be identified, but I talked to her after the fact, and she did. It was an Oscar-winning actress who came out of the film and clearly didn't pay very close attention to the credits, and she said, "I thought the movie was directed by a woman." That's what Hilary Swank said.
Oh, wow.
And I
Of all
thought,
people, of all people.
I thought it was a great compliment in that I think what she was saying, and the way I took it, I think what she intended, is that there's a level of empathy and compassion that maybe a lot of male directors either don't have or don't exhibit. There's that understanding of how people's inner emotional lives work that you're willing to be open to. I'm just curious if you think that, in a way, is validation of how you approach storytelling. Not that men can't tell empathetic stories, but that there's something about Hilary Swank's comment that speaks to what your intentions are.
Wow. Wow, that's like a funny test. That's a huge compliment to me. I would call that like one of the higher compliments, and especially coming from someone as like deep and has done as much work as she has. I never met her, but that's really nice. So when you're talking right now, here's what came to my mind. It's me and Joaquin, who love women, right, and come from matriarchal families. That's not a joke. We do. We come from families that are like women hold the power. It's women-centric families, and we spend a lot of time just talking about mothers and in our lives, and our admiration and kind of like, holy fuck, god damn it, how do they get so ahead of like me trying to be the best dad I can, and they're still, god dang it, they plan better, they're more able to use language in a way that's effective. I wish I could. And so maybe it's I think part of the engine of the script in this film. It's just me and Joaquin sitting in my office, admiring all the moms we know, and trying to figure them out. And that's lovely. Like as an experience between the two of us, it's like lovely, so fun. And I think we both like really look up to the women like in our immediate lives. So maybe that's a play, maybe, yeah.
And Woody, I hope you feel the same way about your mom who's with us.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I could go on for hours just talking amazingly about her, but I do that in every other interview. Google it.
Woody, Mike, and you all especially, thanks so much for coming
Yeah, thank
out.
you so
I
much.
must say
Oh wait,
about
Woody's
Mike's,
the last word.
I mean, Mike's brilliant writing is, Mike can write a mum.
Yeah.
Mike can write the intricacies of a mum, and he doesn't just write as a single, like, just like, you know what I mean? In a lot of movies, mums are just like these lovey-dovey, oh my god, always so loving. That's not how any mother is. I get tired of my mum and she gets tired of me. That's what makes us close. If you get along with your family 24/7, especially siblings, I'm assuming you hate them. And another thing is, I think, I laughed because the way Mike just said, oh my god, I love women, I thought that was very funny. If I took that out of context and made it a clip, I would play that 24/7 and laugh. It's very funny. Okay.